It's time to present Scott DuPont to bring you another episode of Finance Your Movie with tips and strategies to help you get your money to tell your story. It's time!
Okay, we're back. Another exciting episode of Finance Your Movie. I'm here, thrilled to be here today with Alex Haughey. He's the writer, producer, director of Under the Influencer. Welcome, Alex.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Scott, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And before we dive into this film, it's a really, really cool film. Great, timely film. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Andrea McKinnon from AMCK PR. Thanks for hooking us up. She does great work. And so, Alex, I want to start a little bit about your background before we get to your new film, Under the Influencer. Thanks again for being on the show.
Yeah.
You live in LA right now. Are you an LA native, or did you migrate here?
No, I'm an import. I grew up in Kansas City, so I was in the middle of the country, and I came out to do film school at USC. So that's kind of like when I migrated this direction, and I've stuck it out ever since.
And did you know you wanted to be a filmmaker in your teenage years, or?
So yeah, I was my high school had a really good actually broadcast journalism kind of program. So that kind of put a camera in my hands. I had no I mean, I always liked movies, but I had no, when you grow up, I mean, in somewhere like Kansas City, it was like you just don't even really, that doesn't really even cross your mind as like a possibility to do something like that. And so I really count myself very fortunate that I was able to get in this program, and they just put a camera in my hands, and to learn to use the camera, they were like, okay, go make some shorts and some music videos. And mine just, from the beginning, I would make things, and it just kind of made sense for me where it really didn't for other people. And that's when I first started noticing that, like, oh yeah, like my videos are coherent and no one else's are, so that was kind of like the first kind of real, moment for me to say, like, okay, there may be something here. And so I kind of went down that path of broadcast journalism for a while. I actually went to do a year of school at University of Missouri where I was studying that. And then, but I had made a small movie at the end of my senior year of high school that had just, like, people knew of me as the movie guy at that point. And I had like 300 people came to a showing, and like,
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was like it was a real moment where then at that point I was like, okay, well, I'm not gonna go be a sportscaster if I can, if I can do this. And so basically that first year at the University of Missouri, I just took all the GE classes I could and got good grades so that I could make the transfer out to LA to study film.
So you knew early on you had some kind of gift, and certainly you had a passion for it. Yeah. You did a very typical filmmaker, right? You did a whole bunch of shorts, I see.
Yeah.
Great training. And then I guess at some point you got this desire or spark, said, hey, I got to finally do a feature. I want to do something that can make some money, build a brand. And that was Prodigy, correct?
Yeah, correct.
So tell us a little bit about how all that came back, how it came together, and where you got the money to do your first feature.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it was kind of backwards, really, because that first movie I made in high school, was like a 45-minute movie. So it was kind of like a longer form than usual. And so doing shorts to me always felt really constraining. And I'm really glad that I did those shorts. I think they were very, instrumental into kind of teaching me and forcing me into learning kind of every step of the process. But the whole time I was always thinking, like, I want a bigger canvas. I want more room to operate. And I think the best thing about them was that I was working with a partner on those shorts, most of them, that we became really simpatico and just really good at making something out of nothing, was kind of the way we talked about it. Because, we were working, nothing jobs, trying to just scrounge together money to we made these shorts for, between $500 and probably $1,500. They were really made for nothing. So at the time we were basically like, oh, you know what? If we could get a little bit of money together and we structured it right, we could absolutely pull off a feature just kind of using the tricks that we've learned along this way. And
So I sent some micro budget is coming here.
exactly. So, well, and it was even smaller. At first we thought, you know, 20, 30,000 would be enough for us to pull it off, because he's an editor by trade. And so he could handle a lot of the post-production, like, elements himself. And like, I'm always been very, like, I've had a lot of, I bring a lot of ingenuity in terms of even just like, again, finding locations, making connections, talking to people about, like, so we worked really well together, and we kind of cooked this script up for Prodigy a year before we started making it, basically. And it came out really fast because we worked really well together. But we said, like, okay, let's make a one location thing with a few characters so that we can actually, you know, control the environment and actually pull this off. And out of that grew this idea that, you know, for these it's kind of an interrogation. It really is kind of a psychological thriller. And I've always seen it as kind of like an extended Twilight Zone episode, kind of, because there's like some sci-fi elements that kind of sprinkle in, like, about a third or halfway through the movie. They only show up then. And so we kind of set about it. We worked on the script for about a year because we both kind of picked up better jobs, and then it really became a reality when it was actually funny, because I was working a job at a company that makes video games, and it kind of became clear the writing was on the wall that project was going to get canceled. But I had, like, they had given us some stock in the company, and if I knew that it had, like, vested, and so I was like, well, we can take that money and just use it as our budget.
Wow. So that was the money that did
that was kind of the
Prodigy
seed money. Yeah. So essentially, I mean, sorry to the company I was working for, but I knew I could very clearly tell they were going to cancel our project. And so, like, for the last month or 6 weeks that I was working there, I basically was just working on starting to get the ball rolling on pre-production. Basically, I set up locations, and I put out casting notices, and then on the weekends we'd bring people in and do reads and all that kind of stuff.
What was the total budget on Prodigy?
On Prodigy, so we started with, I brought in about, I mean, that the stock I had was worth about probably 30 to 30. I mean, it was only like just over $30,000. And then we ended up raising about 10 more from just, like, friends and family. And so we used that as kind of our production money. And then we ended up raising, I think in the end, we ended up just over 50,000. Like, we raised a little bit more in post to help us get across the finish line. But yeah, it was still just a tiny production. And I mean, it's something I'm really proud of, because I just, like, especially even looking at it now, I just, like,
and the movie got out there. It's in distribution, right?
Right. Yeah. So we really made the most of it. And it was such a cool process with that movie, because it was our first time doing it, so we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants, you know, just trying to get it out there. And I ended up doing just so much of the marketing and promotion myself, but we got it out there, and we actually kind of went in the back door. We got it, like, it's not really a horror movie, but we kind of got the horror audience behind it. We sent it out to all these big horror outlets that they all reviewed it, and they all really liked the movie. So we got all these really glowing reviews from these outlets that have 800,000, 1.5 million, 2 million followers on Facebook, and they just put those, you know, they send out those reviews. And so when the movie came out, there was enough awareness that it just really splashed onto Amazon much bigger than they were expecting. And it kind of got into the algorithm. And in that second month, we were, like, tripled the business.
Wow.
And so what was really cool was that then, based on that performance, it got picked up by Netflix, and it ran on Netflix for 2019, basically.
Now, was that kind of an upfront licensing deal where they gave you a little bit of cash and they had it for X number of times?
Yeah, so they made a deal for a year, and they basically paid out every quarter. They paid a quarter of the deal. So I was hoping they would, you know, just leave us up there if they wanted, but
and then after that, all the streaming rights reverted back to you.
They reverted back. So, and they only had exclusive. I can't remember which was they only had the exclusive one for free, like subscription services. Like you could still buy it on Amazon and all that stuff while it was
Yeah,
open.
yeah, SVOD.
Yeah, SVOD, that's right.
So your investors made, your friends and family who came in made a little bit of money. Good for them.
Every year when I send checks out, I always get I always get nice notes back like, I always forget that that I put money into this, because they very clearly put money in thinking that they were sending that money out the door.
Yeah, you got that risk disclosure.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I mean, you know, I had no idea what to expect. I mean, I only knew we had a chance because we kept the budget so low.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's, you know, obviously that helps a lot. And the movie went on and it performed. I mean, it still brings, I mean, until through last year, it still brings in decent money, you know, every year, which
congratulations.
I think it's because of the kind of horror aesthetics we put into the marketing. Like, I think it can just kind of, it can kind of like keep coming back and circling around there. But
it's a hot genre.
Yeah. So that worked out for us. And again, we got a ton of coverage and good reviews, and it was really fun. It was a really fun process to be a part of. And then unfortunately it was like that came off of Netflix right at 2020. So I was going to like try to like, you know, take a step forward, and then the pandemic hit. So it was kind of like,
so
no.
Pandemic. Prodigy gets out 2017. You get through the pandemic, and then the idea for Under the Influencer.
Yeah.
Right.
So
and that was a bigger budget. I'm guessing it looks about $500,000 or so.
Yeah, it was under 500,000.
Okay.
And so still very low. Not closer. I wish it was closer to 500,000.
Not a true micro budget.
But well, it depends on who you ask, I guess. But
so how did you, obviously that's significantly more money, and you didn't have extra stock options to cash a second time. So who were the people, how did you raise the money for Under the Influencer?
Yeah. So it was a totally different process. Obviously, I mean, it was cool because it was kind of like the last piece of the puzzle with Prodigy. Was like Prodigy so far exceeded everybody's expectations on every level, except for kind of like leading to the next thing. That's really what I was, you know, which is the most important part as far as I was concerned. And I was coming out of the pandemic, you know, it was like, you know, there hadn't been any work. I made like a short film during the pandemic, but I hadn't really been able to, I've been doing some writing work and had some success there, but I wasn't flush with cash. I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to kind of start from scratch a little bit and make a few shorter things this year coming out of into 20, I guess it would have been 2021. And you know, I was thinking, oh well, you know, I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do this next year. And I was starting to put together some ideas for some stuff, and it was kind of brainstorming smaller ideas. And right at that time, I went to a party where one of the investors he had invested, I mean, nothing in Prodigy. He had invested like $1,500 or $2,000 or something like that. He cornered me at a party and was like, hey, you know, like,
when you doing your next film?
Well, right. And like, when are you doing another one? I want in. And I'm like, oh, well, I mean, great. But again, I didn't think he was going to come in with big money. He wasn't a big investor in the first one. So I was like, yeah, well, you know, I don't want to do it that small again. I want to step up into something. And basically he was like, you know, well, what if we had, you know, a little bit more money on the table? And I was like, well, and he kind of put
this
out,
is a real 5 or 6 figure check.
Yeah, exactly. So he was like, he basically put out the amount of money that was like just enough that I couldn't ignore. You know what I mean? I didn't really want to do a tiny movie again because it's just a strain. And now I've got a mortgage and 2 kids to take care of. So I know that's not an endeavor that's worth doing if it's going to be, you know, if you're going to pour your life into this for almost a year and, you know, for nothing, it's really a hard commitment at this point. So,
awesome. So this guy's on board. Did that help you reach out to other people and say, hey, we need this goal? Like what was the next step?
So he came in with a big chunk, and it was amazing because I had just had this idea like within a week of him coming to me.
Wow.
where I saw this old French movie that reminded me of, I had worked for a YouTuber about 4 or 5 years ago, and I worked for this really big YouTuber who was kind of in her mid-20s and kind of having this midlife crisis because she didn't know what to do.
You
And
really did yourself?
I actually worked for her. Yeah, I worked for her
Wow.
for a year. And so I saw this old French movie that reminded me of her, and it's a really classic kind of French New Wave movie that did a lot of really interesting things narratively. And I just had immediately thought like, man, that would be really interesting to take that narrative structure and lay it over my experience with this YouTuber and kind of see where that lands, in a more modern context.
Wow.
And so I went within it. The guy had come to me at the party and kind of said like, if you have an idea, come to me and we'll talk. I've got money that I want to put into something. And I went to him the next week and to kind of pitched him this idea, and he was into it. So it just kind of, it was amazing because it just like all of a sudden the ball was rolling. And I at first was like trying to talk to that YouTuber to try and, make it like a meta kind of faux documentary, half like, mix up thing where I could have Perv be starring in it and all this stuff. And I had a lot of ideas up front that kind of got cast out the door along the way. But I mean, I was already like right when she kind of said like, I don't want to do it, I immediately, I wrote the script in probably 2 months. And I was, again, because I did everything myself on the first one, that was kind of the biggest lesson was like, okay, I need a team on this one.
Yeah. And money can help with a team.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing is like, okay, I can't pay these people a lot, but I can pay them something, and I know that will be worth it. And so I hired a really solid group of producers that again just kind of made my life manageable throughout that time. Whereas in the first one, it was like I was doing props, I was doing costumes, I was doing, special effects. So we were doing everything ourselves on that one. And so that was where I knew I wanted to spend my money was that. And then my DP, I kind of was like, okay, I'm going to give you a huge chunk of this. And like, I want you to just handle it. And he's amazing. So he did. And so like,
so you had the team in place.
Yeah.
You got this guy with who comes in as your executive producer,
right,
so to speak.
Exactly. Right. He's the money.
Other people coming in organically, you were sharing a business plan. How did you finish it out?
So we had his money basically, his investment basically took us through production for the most part. And we were able to get pretty much everything done. And I knew pretty early on that like, okay, I don't want to feel like I have to cut corners. And I know for the money we've got, because he initially came in with a bigger, like I could give you this much. And then he was like, well, maybe more like this much. So I knew like, okay, well, I can do production for that. And I was kind of like, classic filmmaker, like, well, I'll worry about post when we get there. But I was very confident at that point, especially again, given that I had some success, that I could raise some money in post to kind of like, to kind of get us over that threshold. So I kind of knew that. And like, even in production, I went back to him and got a little bit more money here and there when like, okay, I want to try to do this thing. I would pitch him ideas. He's an amazing guy. And he was so accommodating throughout the entire process. And Mikitarian is his name. He was our executive producer, and he's just like, he's the founder of the feast for sure. And he didn't get in the way. He didn't like try to block us with anything. He, had
Awesome.
Creative ideas and was able to just communicate those. And we incorporated where we needed to and didn't where we didn't like, and it was an amazing experience. So that was great. And then I raised, probably, I think we needed about between like 30 and 40,000 in post that I was able to get together just by, going out to mostly friends and family, and again, more friends.
People you knew.
Yeah, so some people I knew, and I'm trying to remember if there was anybody that I actually kind of pitched on it that I didn't know. I think most of them were people, and again, it was all people that
believed in you.
Yeah, exactly. These were mostly people who were still surprised by the last movie.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't have to raise. I wasn't looking to raise that much. And again, a lot of it was also like I was coming at it from a place of like, now all these people who are my friends too are like more established, and I knew I could ask more of them realistically and not like break the bank.
Yeah.
So
And
that worked out.
people always want to help you out with an exciting project if they know you,
Right.
if they're able to.
Yeah, exactly.
I
And
mean,
I had worked up enough cachet with them just by having done a successful movie before, and knowing that going into this, it's like this movie, it has a, you know, the influencer angle, and now especially with my distributor, we've kind of going to take kind of a rom-com angle in the marketing of it. I think that it has a a potentially higher ceiling than Prodigy did, just because I think there's a broader audience that is accessible with it if we can actually tap into that audience. And
oh,
so
I think for sure. I don't want to give any spoilers out, but I love the movie. I think it's very timely, and anybody who watches YouTube videos or these
yeah.
social media influencers, it's like it's happening.
Yeah, and it's cool because I think that it does kind of clearly the hook is that world and this kind of phenomenon that we're all still trying to wrap our heads around, that's kind of just come about in the last 10 years of just like someone who can just put videos online and make a very healthy living doing it. And what that means for their maturation and their mental health. But I think that what's cool about it is that it's also it's very universal in its message, in the sense that like it's just about how we all get our identities wrapped up in things that aren't right for us sometimes, whether that's a job or a relationship or politics or lifestyles, whatever. There's a lot of things that we can kind of lose ourselves in, and I think that this is just a story about somebody getting lost in this particular avenue, and like the ability to find your way out and put your feet on solid ground again is kind of what I think.
I think anybody watching that will relate to that.
Right. And it's, I think that,
by the way, the movie is out right now.
That's right.
So where is the best way that people can see this movie if they want to check it out?
Absolutely. It's Amazon is kind of the best place. It's kind of the most universal place, but it's streaming everywhere. So you can get it at Amazon or iTunes or Fandango or Google, wherever you stream movies at. It's on all the platforms. So
Under the Influencer. Go check it out right now. And what's the best way if someone wants to follow you on, speaking of social media, someone wants to follow you or contact you?
So yeah, I'm actually off social media, which is ironic in certain ways. But the movie is out there at Under the Influencer Film is kind of our handle everywhere. So if you just look that up, you'll find us on pretty much all the platforms.
Awesome. So one bit of advice that I've always shared, and you reinforced it today, is when you're thinking about staying home and not going out to a party, go. Thank God you went to that party, because the influencer might not have happened. But seriously, any other words of parting advice to filmmakers? You kind of grinded it out. Your first film, you had success. You had to get that guy on board, which was kind of luck, but all the other investors you brought in for post. What's some words of wisdom for filmmakers looking for money right now?
I mean, for me, it's interesting because it's like I've always, since I kind of started by, like we talked about, like kind of doing it myself, I feel like the platform is accessible to you in so many ways now. I think a lot of people are intimidated by how much they think things are going to cost. And if you get creative, I think there is a world where you can make a movie for a lot less money than you think you can. And so I think a lot of people put kind of limitations on themselves in terms of like, oh, I can't do it because I'll never raise that kind of money. And I get it. It's intimidating to like think that you have to raise millions of dollars to do something, but I just don't think that that's necessarily the case anymore. And I think a lot of people don't reach their potential because they're kind of waiting on something to come to them, when if you get creative, you can find ways to bring yourself closer to where you want to be, without having to be beholden to some of the downside that comes with financing from outside sources sometimes.
I agree 100%. And even a $250,000 movie or a $500,000 movie, if you can't get that in your first one, maybe try to do a $100,000 movie.
Right.
But to start.
And again, it's like we talked a little bit about it, but it's like I think that that's something that, you know, it's hard to hear as a younger filmmaker to think like, oh, put a box around what you have to do. But it's like that's the way we were able to have not only make a movie, but make a successful movie with our first movie, was to say, okay, give me a room with two people, and then let's slap a kind of a horror, even just aesthetic on our marketing. And all of a sudden we were able to actually not just make a movie, but make a movie that garnered the attention of people and got out there and got seen by people, which is, I mean, really that's the hardest part nowadays, is because there's so much material out there. You have to make something that people are going to actually click on it and look at. So I think that you can absolutely do it if you think about it and just strategize a little bit more in the early stages of what you're doing, and make sure that you're not putting yourself in a place where you're going to make something that's not appealing to an audience of any kind once it gets out there.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on your initial success with Prodigy. I hope Under the Influencer just takes off. Check it out now on Amazon. Alex Haughey, thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. And remember, it's time!
There's never been a better time to make your own indie film. And if you have a dream project you're excited about and 100% committed to getting it funded, go to financeyourmovie.com and click on the green telephone button. You'll see our calendar, and if you find an open spot, grab it. You'll get a one-on-one call with me or one of my partners. It will be the best hour you've ever spent getting clarity and strategy towards financing your movie. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.